She's a lawyer, an advocate, and leader in the community. She's Wala Blegay, and she wants to keep you in the know because times are tough and you need answers.
Welcome to In the Know with Wala Blegay, where we are exploring issues that are impacting our community. And today we're going to focus on an important issue, the progressive movement. This is a time where we are seeing a wave of candidates winning elections throughout the United States, and they are identifying as progressive. And we have seen Stacey Abrams, who's won governor in the Democratic primary in Georgia, Ben Jealous in Maryland, Andrew G.U.M in Florida, and all of them saying we are progressive candidates. This is a different wave because in 2016, when Bernie Saunders announced he was a progressive and he was running in the Democratic primary, many saw a group of young people, and many have even said most of them were white. There wasn't people of color in that movement, but they all identified themselves as progressive and a part of the Democratic Party. Many were critical, but now today, after Trump won his election, it moved most of the party, many of the candidates to the left, and many of them are now identifying themselves as progressive. Now, what is a progressive? Most progressives identify themselves on issues such as Medicare for all, attacking corporate welfare, looking at immigration reform, looking at the environment, criminal justice reform. Many of these issues, many of the candidates have said, we're progressive and this is our agenda. And that's changing within the Democratic Party. There are those outside the Democratic Party who also identify as progressive, but they have the Green, they have the Libertarians, but mostly this is within the Democratic Party, changing the entire party. And it's changing it so much that even the national candidates who possibly could be running for president are even attaching themselves with progressive issues. We look at Senator Cory Booker, Senator Kamala Harris, even Vice President Joe Biden, and my favorite, Senator Elizabeth Warren. Those who have actually put themselves in either progressive realm or even pushed the progressive agenda. So things are changing in American political system. And the future, we don't know what the future holds, but there are organizations who have committed themselves to the progressive agenda. We're looking at Our Revolution. We're looking at Democracy for America, even MoveOn.org, Indivisible, more, who have now focused on promoting candidates who either identify themselves as progressive and even pushing the progressive agenda. And today we're going to be interviewing Larry Cohen. Larry Cohen is the president of Our Revolution, a Bernie-backed organization that's focusing on the progressive agenda. They see their mission to push the progressive agenda and candidates who identify themselves as progressive. So we're going to ask them, what does the future hold? Because there was a progressive era back in the early 1900s, and now we're seeing it today. And these organizations are going to shape the future of the Democratic Party and of the progressive movement. So let's listen in on a great interview with Larry Cohen, former president of Communication Workers of America, and now the chair of Our Revolution. Welcome, gang. We are here with a very well-known progressive leader, Larry Cohen, from Our Revolution. He is board chair with Our Revolution. Our Revolution actually has been one of the main organizations leading in the progressive movement and the fight against sort of what's going on today, and really a fight for the people. And Larry actually has been committed for a long time. He is actually an international president, former international president of the CWA. Welcome.
Yeah, great to be with you again.
All right,
great to see you.
Good, great to see
Appreciate
you.
what you're doing here and everywhere else.
Yeah. So let's talk about the progressive movement. Progressive, the word has been used so loosely. Everybody's like, I'm a progressive, and that's good. That's credit to you and the movement that you brought forth that has allowed everyone to kind of jump on the bandwagon. But how did you get involved with the sort of progressive movement? What led you to this point?
Well, for me, it's most of my life. I grew up in North Philadelphia in the 70s, late 60s, when even in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, we had a police commissioner who was blatantly racist,
right,
and at the same time named Frank Rizzo, who went on to be the Democratic Party mayor for for 2 terms. And so it was clear to me then, and it wasn't just the racism, we were also fighting against the war in Vietnam.
Yeah, wow.
As young kids, my friends were dying there,
Right.
and literally. And so it was clear to me then that progressive didn't just mean vote in an election for a Democrat.
Right.
It meant that we had to build a much broader, transformative movement, as I say, working class movement, black, brown, and white.
Right.
And I was lucky enough to be able to help organize a union at work a few years later.
Wow.
And then, as you said, 20 years after that, I was elected the president of this giant 700,000 member union.
Wow.
But to me, it's always been about how do we link together progressive for all of us,
Right.
not just how we vote, but meaning like health care for all, the right to organize a union and where you work without interference, fighting against mass incarceration, which I saw in Philadelphia at that time. They would arrest us, black or white, but much more often black. And then they would say, well, we'll make a plea. If you plead guilty, it's even happened to me. Now you won't have to do any time, no trial. Well, guess what? For most kids, again, most of them were black who face this.
Right.
They plead guilty, and then their life is on a path that you well know.
Right.
As a lawyer fighting this kind of injustice every day. So anyway, that's my 50-year journey. It's not that important. But today, a lot of those same elements, I would say, are still there. That yes, the Democratic Party may be part of it, elections are part of it, but what is it that we stand for?
Right.
We stand for really a very clear vision about economic justice, racial justice, and beyond that I think defines us. Not exactly, but more or less.
And so specifically, let's talk about for progressives. Is this about the Democratic Party? Is this about changing the Democratic Party? What is this about?
Yeah, well, for us in our revolution, most of us do see part of it is about changing the Democratic Party. We just won important gains in terms of opening up the party, at least in presidential nominations. I was heavily involved in that, 2 years of effort on that. But that is part of it. But it's what we say is it's really 3 things. It's party building, yes. It's candidates, like when you were running in the House of Delegates in Maryland, great candidates like you. But it's also issues, sort of fundamentally, the issues that candidates run on that we're trying to bring a party to embrace, issues like immigration reform and economic justice, fighting economic inequality, Medicare for all, it's a long list, college for all. But so the issues are really at the center, I would say, but then the offshoots are building a progressive party that's adhering to those issues and candidates running on those issues, not just their own journey.
Now let's talk about the recent superdelegates when you all had, and some people push that that was the beginning. The whole Bernie movement was the beginning of this progressive movement. Talk about that.
Yeah, that's where I met you, thankfully.
Yeah. Go Bernie, go.
So that one particular part of party reform says that those 715 people, that there are a lot of them, so that's 25% of the delegates, a little bit less, 20% of the delegates, that they can support whoever they want, say in 2020, the next presidential year, but they will not vote unless it's a deadlocked first ballot. The first ballot is only going to be, in my opinion, rightfully so, those delegates who are elected in primaries and caucuses pledged to a candidate. So the voters who vote in the primary, for president will be determining, through their votes, who the next nominee will be of this party. That's a lot different than the last time, 2016 and before, where these automatic delegates, 715 of us, I've been one for 14 years, would say who we were for before anyone had voted.
Right.
And then people think, well, it's hopeless.
Right.
So in 2016, before the first vote was cast, 500 or more were already supporting Hillary Clinton. That's their right, but that totally tilted the perception of is change possible.
Right. Well, let's look at our revolution now. What was the founding of our revolution? What spurred the founding of our revolution? How old is it?
Well, it came out of that campaign, and you were a great part of that.
Yes.
Appreciate meeting you there.
Yeah.
So it was basically saying that we want to continue the movement, that lots of groups were involved. It wasn't just a top-down campaign. We want to keep those groups together and alive, and we want to work on these 3 things: issues, candidates, and party building.
Right.
And we're proud to have Nina Turner as our full-time president.
Right.
She leads a small staff of about 25. I'm a volunteer. I chair the board.
Right.
She's also part of the board. So for me, it's a partnership with Nina Turner.
Nice. Okay. So now we're looking at the wins. Now I would say for some people they've said progressive leaders are usually white. They're usually white people, right? A lot of people have said that. But that has been debunked with these recent election wins. So what is happening?
Well, so first of all, for us, as I said before, it's working class people, black, brown, and white. That's not an accident. Saying it that way. And, you know, we recognize the numbers overall. But if we're not consciously multicultural, multiracial, we'll never build what I call a movement of 50 million people.
Right.
And we have to be able to say that to everybody.
Right.
That we can build that kind of movement, but only if it looks like that.
Right.
Not if it, for example, as you mentioned, would be all white people saying that.
Right.
And so, so what's exciting is whether they win or lose, a huge number of our candidates, and we don't endorse in every election, obviously, but about 200, but at least half were people of color and more than half were women.
Right.
Probably more than half were people of color. And some exciting victories like Andrew Gillum in Florida.
Okay. And talk about
Ben Jealous in our state of Maryland. Again, not accidents. Ben was on our board nationally. There's only 11 on the board. He left the board when he announced for governor. But he was a founder, really, of our revolution. And this idea that the Bernie campaign was not just an election, it was a part of building a movement. And so, again, these are conscious things. Particularly those two are supporting you. And more so at that state legislative or even city council level. That's where we can make the biggest difference, even though we get more publicity around, say, Andrew Gillum or Ben Jealous, or Alexandria Octavia-Cortez, you know, beating Corrali in New York City in the congressional race. So the media, the bigger media, is drawn to those. It's like an addiction.
Right.
We're actually more about party building.
Right.
So for us, you know, supporting people like you, win or lose, as long as we're building something in Prince George's County, that's cool, and that's our goal.
And so when you talk about parity building, have there been wins in states from lower levels, what people would call down ballot candidates?
Yeah, tons at that level. I mean, in almost every primary. Again, they don't get the same notice, but that's the majority of them. And again, to me, the win means that the party building and the organizing gets stronger, because otherwise we'll just be picking people, you know, like the polling, like we're pollsters, you know, based on they're going to win.
Right.
And you know, we're not here for that. Right. And so mostly the people we endorse have an uphill fight.
Right.
So like yesterday with Kerry Davis running against the probably 5-time incumbent state national senator.
In what state?
In Delaware. And she lost, but she got 29,000 votes. The turnout was twice what it was predicted to be. Had it been the normal turnout, she probably would have won. But the point isn't that she didn't win and that Senator Carper won that primary. The point more is showing that we can say to him, it's fine that you want to be a centrist and collaborate with Republicans. Many of us don't agree with that.
Right.
That this Republican Party is off the rails. We need to fight them, challenge them, and motivate people to vote based on what we stand for, not starting with the premise that we'll work with whoever they are.
Right. So what does the future hold? Like, what do you want to see in the next 5 years with the progressive movement?
I want to see a lot more party building, which means 3,000 counties in America, Democratic Party or some alternative that's realistic, where we actually become the party and build the party, talk to unaffiliated voters, who are the biggest number in this country, about why it makes sense to be involved in politics, not just in one election, but in actually building something, that the issues that we talk about all the time, you and I, become even more real. The Bernie campaign helped with things like Medicare for all, or free college, or fighting mass incarceration, or fair immigration. But we have to build organization that's rooted in those issues, and then candidates. So what I want to see in 5 years is that it is clear as day that we can build, organize, and win on issues like that.
Well, I must applaud you because it's already working. I mean, I see just about every candidate in town calling themselves progressives, and I'm like, wait, weren't you
Yeah, where's your money coming from?
Right. And then
follow the money.
Well, can you talk quickly about that, because we hear the word corporate Democrats, and I feel that that's what progressives are fighting against.
Yeah.
What is corporate Democrats? What is that?
Yeah, well, knowing your background, you could probably do better on that than me, because you faced one.
Yeah.
But it's when people like you run for election, and what do they face? They face somebody who has enough money they can mail constantly. They can do their own polling. They can figure out what to say, whether they act. My great-grandmother used to say, watch your legs, not your mouth. It's their mouth while they're running, and then their legs never get there.
Yeah.
And that's how I would define them. And where is their money coming from? Big wealthy donors, either directly tied to corporate Democrats.
Yeah, corporate Democrats. So you're saying that you have someone who is supported by really corporations, but talking working.
Yeah, corporations are really wealthy money that is tied back ideologically to those corporations. It could be either one. Those kind of donors that are looking at their stock portfolio and their dividends. They're not looking at how's Main Street doing.
Right.
And they literally whitewash. I use that term deliberately. All the issues we care about, but they then pay for mailers directly to people's homes. They have unlimited money, and so candidates like you, very uphill, or Curry Davis last night in Delaware, very uphill when people are getting targeted mailings week after week or even more, and we're relying totally on volunteers knocking on doors and on the phones.
Right. And I think more so, we found that for the Democratic Party, I've seen that they've usually used this idea of we're the party of the working families.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, if you're part of working families, but then all your money comes from corporate, and then you're voting on corporate issues in favor that might hurt working families, then,
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah. So in general, what about the 2020 election? That's, final thing. Now, the progressive movement has been very successful in making sure that everyone wants to be in line with them. So I'm seeing in 2020, we've got all these candidates coming up, and a lot of them are saying, I'm progressive, or
they're all
pushing progressive issues. So where do you focus now? You're mainstream. So how does our revolution and even progressive leaders like you address that issue?
Yeah. So we want to really define on the issues, and also on saying, will you agree in running for president, no corporate PAC money, no money from management of major corporations, no money from donors who adhere to the ideology of corporate management and of those corporations, period. And that's a starting point, because again, watch your feet. Where's your money coming from? Not just your mouth. Because now many of them who will run will say, oh, I'm for Medicare for all. Yeah, but they're not going to fight for it. We're looking for people who are going to fight for these things. They're going to fight against mass incarceration. They're going to fight for fair immigration, not leaving dreamers hang out there and saying, yeah, I'm for the dreamers.
Or like standing with them for photo ops.
Yeah, and then they don't take a stand, right? They go along. They continue to vote like nothing's changed. No, we want the resistance to come into the Congress, but not just resist, but to fight for what the kind of world that working people want to see. And that's the question. Who will actually run on that banner? We don't know that yet exactly, but that not just the words, but that we can tell by where they've been and what kind of money have they taken and what kind of life do they live, that they will stand with us, black, brown, and white, when we're ready to fight.
All right. Well, thank you for fighting hard.
Yeah.
Thanks for changing the party and bringing really the true principles of fighting for people really to a party and to our country. Thank you.
Pleasure to stand with you anytime.
All right. Thank you so much. And you heard it from the progressive leader. He says that we want to wash your feet, not your mouth. So, many of those who are saying that they're fighting for progressive issues, as you heard from him, watch their actions. Thank you for joining In the Know with Wala Blegay.